Welcome to Utah Stories. Today on the program, what are the suits up at the state legislature doing about liquor legislation? Will they be passing more laws that make it harder for you to drink? That story is coming up. And we're going to be talking to Alan Scott, the owner of Waterpocket Distillery. And he's going to chime in about what's going on both with liquor legislation and what's happened with his distillery and his awesome products, his awesome lineup of products. And we're going to be getting into that for this first segment. For the second segment, we're going to be getting into, again, the gondola up Little Cottonwood Canyon. We have friends of Cottonwood Canyon coming up on the program. They're going to join us, and there's three of them, three friends of Little Cottonwood Canyon, and they're going to talk about their fight against the gondola up Little Cottonwood Canyon, why they believe it actually wouldn't solve the problem of congestion, and how the UTA and UDOT could solve that problem. And so what is the state legislature up to? Well, there's a lot of bills on the House right now that they're in committee. And what I'm understanding are some of the major pieces of legislation is that there's really a dearth of liquor licenses for bars and restaurants. That's become a big problem because now that liquor has proven to be a major function for tax revenue, they're learning that it does a lot of good for the state of Utah and for the average Utah state taxpayer in terms of alleviating the amount of taxes that we pay. And so they're realizing that if they just opened up more liquor licenses and stopped having this artificial limitation of, I believe it's 10,000, for every 10,000 residents, they're going to have one single license. And if they just decided, well, why not just have two liquor licenses for every 10,000 residents? Obviously, it could do a lot of economic good for the state of Utah, for our tourism industry, for bars and restaurants, and really for the economy as a whole. And so Jerry Stevenson is the man in charge of the legislation up at the Capitol. I'd love to talk to him again. I talked to him about 4 years ago when they were considering raising the alcohol limit in the state of Utah. He's a good guy. He's obviously LDS and doesn't drink, but he's been assigned the task of determining where the liquor legislation is going to go. The bill that I was trying to follow and track that I heard about from a bar owner in downtown Salt Lake City was a bill designed to force bars to hand over all of their camera footage to the police and investigators if there were ever a investigation into over-serving customers. And so Big Brother would have been welcome at all the bars and establishments in Utah. And I think that is an anti-privacy law. I think if that had gone past committee, that would have been terrible. I kind of looked into that legislation. I think it's stalled. Luckily, I don't think we need Big Brother spying on us all the time and determining what people are doing while they're drinking inside of bars. I think that obviously people sometimes are killed due to drunk drivers, and that is the knee-jerk reaction is, let's blame the bars. Let's get down to the business of just putting these bar owners behind bars. And it's just not, it's just like taking away personal accountability from people and determining that there's always somebody else to blame if somebody happens to drink too much and go kill somebody. That's not what a conservative state is all about. You want to hold people personally accountable. And, bar owners are facing increasingly difficult problems getting their insurance policies underwritten. I learned from a bar owner here in Salt Lake that it has become incredibly expensive to underwrite an insurance policy on your bar, and it's also there's only like two providers in the entire state that can provide that. And so the idea that we need to make bar owners even more accountable, they're just going to make it impossible for bar owners to survive. And if you look at the fabric of our downtown Salt Lake City, our pubs and our bars, and even in small towns and places like Moab that I just came back from, it's really the bars and the distilleries and the breweries, the restaurants that provide that. Why should we continue to harm them and make it more difficult for them to stay in business? And, talking to these people over the past couple of months, I really can see that they have a really difficult time as it is. It may look like on a really busy night they're just making tons of money, but it's incredibly difficult for them to hire great staff, to keep the staff employed. We've actually lost a ton of bars and restaurants since COVID, and just making it more difficult is not the answer. So on the program with me today is Alan Scott. Alan is from Waterpocket Distillery. Thanks for joining me, Alan.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, you've done quite a lot since COVID hit. You expanded your operations into Torrey. Right?
Yeah, we just opened a little satellite called Robber's Roost Distillery, which is one of our brands down in the Torrey area. We're very happy to be there. We're at the Edda Place Cidery, which are good friends of ours, and making some incredible farm-to-glass cider down in Torrey, which is, Torrey's annual festival is Apple Days. So there's some history there with Torrey and apples, and I'm glad to see that all being resurrected down there by our friends.
Yeah.
So Robert and Ann.
So what made you decide of all places Torrey?
We're named Waterpocket, which is the name of the main feature that gives us Capitol Reef National Park. Torrey is essentially the gateway city for Capitol Reef. We spend a lot of time down there. We have a little place we like to hang out in Boulder, which is just over Boulder Mountain from Torrey. So we're very fond of the area. That's just very much...
Yeah, it is an awesome area. We got good friends who live down there, too.
It's just wonderful.
They just never come back to Salt Lake. I've heard that's a problem. Once you go down there, it's really hard to come back.
Yeah, you spend a week down there and you come back and you're like, everyone here is insane. They're much more stressed, and you go down there and the pace is a little easier. So we're very happy about that, and gives us a chance to share our products with some new folks, and the people down in Torrey have been wonderful. So it's been a good process.
Yeah, it seems like my buddy started a bakery in Teasdale.
Yeah.
And he goes to the farmers markets and he sells his sourdough bread. And
I know those folks.
Oh, you know Alex in Virginia?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Absolutely. Met them 2 or 3 times now, and they'll come to Edda Place and sell their bread right out in the parking lot.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they told me that.
Yeah. So
small world. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alex is coming to my house for a Super Bowl party on Sunday.
Oh, good. Yeah, there's a new ice cream place down there, creamery, new coffee roaster. What used to be Cafe Diablo has new owners, and they're doing a wonderful job.
What's the new cafe called?
It's called Hunt and Gather, and they have a very sort of foraging, local aesthetic, and they're doing a wonderful job. So
cool.
We're so happy to have them down there. So there's a little culinary foodie renaissance going on in Torrey, and we're happy to be part of that. And we've met all of those people, and they're wonderful. So
yeah. Good reason to go down there, because I think it's like we go to Moab all the time because we do so much business down there. We just got back from there in an upcoming segment. I'm going to get into that, but
good.
The thing is, I think people have in their mind that the major destinations in Utah are like Ogden, Moab, St. George, Bryce Canyon, and I think Capitol Reef is like a little bit fuzzy. Like not a lot of people.
They shouldn't go there. They should stay away. Yeah, it's full of rocks and it's very hot.
Yeah, there's just a lot of sagebrush.
For native Utahns, it's a great park because there aren't a lot of the tourist mobs.
Yeah.
So there's a tranquility there. There's a lot of space to roam. You've got the Aquarius Plateau, so you can go up in the big trees, or you can go down in the canyons or anything in between. So
yeah,
it's just lovely.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's like, man, I gotta say, Moab during the tourist season, April and May, I just think it's way too overcrowded. We tried to get into the park, tried to get actually into the town, and it was like a 2-hour wait just on ice. What is that? Not I-70, but whatever the highway is that goes into Moab. And I was like, this is just way too insane.
And that's that's true of that area. And some of the little communities, Boulder, Escalante, Torrey, some people down there live in fear of that because they don't want to turn into Moab. They don't want all of those headaches. And Moab used to have an intimacy when I first visited there. I think it was 1997. It was a different city, and it didn't have those problems. So I understand people get worried, and we've advertised the Big Five, and it worked, and brought in a ton of people. Now the people who are like desert is solitude, like me, are kind of like, I'll just wait. And that's why I love winter down there, because all those people go away, and it's still beautiful.
We go every February, and we have the whole place to ourselves, and most of the restaurants are shut down, but we can still find good food. And but it's like, what I think kind of poisons the well is you just have big capital come in, and now there's Wingate, there's Hilton, there's Westin, there's just all these big hotels, and somehow the city planning commission in Moab just greenlighted everything, and now you're seeing those even the little independent hotels and motels, they're selling out to big private equity because they can get that $350 per night rate, which is insanely high.
And that's a challenge everywhere. We've got a lot of stressed rural economies. I mean, that's a different discussion than what I'm here for. But the alfalfa and cattle economy is very strained, and it's a traditional way of life. And finding the new solutions is always a challenge, and always politically fraught, and always feels high risk down there. So I understand. We tried to open the distillery down there, and just proposed it, and some reactions were very supportive. Some reactions were very, alarm based, and they were sometimes more than, we're a tiny little micro distillery with essentially 2 people that work there, but we were being asked how many semis per day we're going to be pulling up to our little distillery, and so you can go kind of from zero to nothing, and for the communities that still have that sort of solitude and quiet, that's a huge deal for them. So now that I have a place down there, I'm kind of I'm a little more on the inside than I was before, so I can kind of see if somebody came and said, "Oh, we're building a Motel 6 and putting in a Starbucks," I could see how I might be. If somebody said, "Well, we're going over to burn that down in the middle of the night," like all right, maybe, just because you can. But you can also fall into a lot of slippery slope logic with it, where it's just, if you do anything at all, then tomorrow you're Moab. That's not the case, but it's a discussion to be had.
Yeah. So tell me, backing up, how did you were in the television production business, and then you decided to open a distillery?
Yeah.
This was like 5-6 years ago.
2017, but we started the process 2 years before that. I think we had a facility a year before we opened, so I was full-time working on it 2016.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but we've been open for 5-6 years now. So,
nice.
Yeah.
And how did you decide you wanted to do that?
I think we figured out that we wanted to be some kind of entrepreneur some time ago. We both worked very, very hard. This is me and my wife, but we were always those employees that were a little bit of a pain in the ass for our bosses, because it's sometimes hard to work for a boss, because you have to accept their good decisions with the bad, and by the time that really bothers you, like say in the middle of the night, you really should be thinking about opening your own business. And that was one factor. My wife was a chemical engineer when we first started talking about this. She was working in distillation, just in an oil refinery. I've been a home brewer, home winemaker, that kind of stuff for 20 years, since college. So that's how long it's been since college, maybe longer now. And we looked for something that would kind of combine our skills. We originally thought brewery, but craft distilling was on the uprise, and we had just spent 3 years living in Europe, and before we moved here. And we knew that there was a lot of spirits there that we never saw here, and that weren't culturally established. We had just, watched the last 15 years of craft brewing essentially establish, all sorts of new styles of beer. Mm-hmm. When I grew up, there was 8 beers. They were all pretty much the same style, and now it's not unusual. Everybody drinks IPA, everybody drinks French farmhouse style ales, and it's not, and really it just seemed obvious. Nobody here knows about Kumels, but make a Kumel like our Snow Angel, and you can, and people try it and they're like, I've never had anything like that before. So, and that's what makes it fun. So that's one of the reasons we got into it.
Yeah, I think the whole, unless you've gone to Europe and you've gone to these really super craft distilleries, I think it's a real eye opener.
Yeah,
because we went to this distillery in I think it was just outside of Munich, and we actually ordered a product, and it was like a cream liqueur, and they were all liqueurs, and they poured it from a massive jug into a smaller jug.
Yeah,
and they just like sort of bottled it on the spot.
Yeah,
and I was like, man, I have never seen anything like that before.
Yeah.
And you are the only one I've seen locally who tackles these really interesting liqueurs.
Yeah.
And they have such distinct flavors and characteristics.
Yeah.
Like talk about like the process for example, your Snow Angel. What goes into that?
Well, Snow Angel is a Kumel, which is one of the caraway spirits. So I first had a Kumel in Leipzig, and it happened to be this style of Kumel that we make. And, we're very familiar with like gin, which is a juniper cornerstone spirit, was the way I describe it. Juniper being the dominant ingredient. This is a spirit where caraway seed is the dominant ingredient. And ours is made with caraway, green anise, fennel, coriander, peppermint. And it was just a combination of flavors I'd never tried before. It was so eye-opening, and it was so delightful in a way. It's like this is a new world of flavor. It's just like adding colors to the rainbow. And
I always give that to people who come over,
and
they look at it like, is this gin? And is it like peppermint schnapps? I'm
right.
Like, no,
it's neither.
Nothing like
it's
one.
neither.
And then then we try it, and it's amazing because it's just a flavor you've never experienced before.
Yeah, well, and it's often true of a lot of stuff that we consume here. We are in a post-prohibition world, dominated by major marketing brands. Until craft brewing came along, and now craft distilling, we really didn't have much regional distillation, regional brewing. If we did, it was the exception. It was something you ran into when you were on vacation in San Francisco, and you're like, oh, what is this Anchor beer? But then you realize those people kind of pioneered opening up the craft space. You can make a really distinctive, interesting beer in a different style. And, it doesn't have to be Bud or Miller or Schlitz or Milwaukee's Best or any of the other beers that are very similar in style.
Yeah.
So that's now a new world for everybody. And distillation can be the same. Once you break out of bourbon and you break out of some of the traditional spirits, and you break out of the mentality that gin comes from the UK, well, it doesn't have to. You can certainly distill it here. You can make all sorts of things here. And there's a deep history. Prohibition eliminated a lot of stuff, a lot of regional things. And Prohibition, if we think about it, was a moment for a lot of people to sort of lose bits of their European heritage. So Germans drink Kumel, but why don't they drink it anymore? Well, there was kind of a homogenizing effect with our country's relationship with alcohol. Same thing was true of things like Amaros. Most people don't know what Amaros are anymore, or bitters, if it came from the German tradition. But they've been part of our European heritage for, 2,000 years in some form or another. And their relationship with traditional medicine, all sorts of that's also sewn into the culture over there.
And so at Amaro, that's not the one that's a little similar to a Jaeger, is it?
Jaeger would be a specific type of German Amaro.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a problem with the use of Amaro, whether you're specifying Italian spirits, but in terms of the class of like spirits, the Italians will call them Amaros or bitters. The Germans will call them Kraut or liqueurs or Amaros or Dropfen or Magenbitters. The French will call them Amers or some individual thing.
And are those all under digestives, or
So a lot of them, if it has a set of these herbs, specific herbs, balanced with aromatics, it falls into that tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually never understood that at all until I was about 25, and I was doing a bike trip in Luxembourg.
Yeah.
And I told the people I was at a campground, but they had a restaurant, that I had kind of an upset stomach. I wasn't feeling that good. And
They brought you a little Amaro.
Yeah, they were like, have a digestive.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, it like will help calm your stomach and help you digest your food.
Yeah.
I was like, liquor does that?
How
And
could it?
I'd never heard that in my
I know.
life.
Right.
And I tried it, and I was like, man, I actually did feel a little better.
Yeah, I have some people that come and buy my Amaros just for that,
Yeah.
but, we don't do anything that we call medicinal. We're not legally allowed to do that. And, they're aesthetic experiences primarily. But that's their pedigree.
So
That's
unlike the essential oils business, where everything's medicinal,
Yeah,
and it's
right.
legal to call it that, you're in the liquor business, you can't call
Which
anything
is more,
medicinal.
we can't put the word elixir, we can't put the word potion or anything that suggests medicinal
Unless it was
on the bottle.
a nutritional supplement.
Which is largely unregulated business. So, yeah.
Thanks to Orrin Hatch.
Thanks to Orrin Hatch. Yeah, you know the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's awesome, and yeah, we're showing Toadstool Nautum,
good.
and that's basically your what are the herbs in that again?
So it's the bittering herbs are driven by turkey rhubarb, gentian, aloe ferox, century leaf, and 2 or 3 others. It's got a lot of bittering agents. The aromatics are driven a little more by like green anise, fennel, a little bit of star anise, cinnamon, peppermint, that kind of thing.
And you just kind of work on the recipe to dial in the flavor.
Yeah, it's all about kind of achieving a aesthetic effect. These are well out of the medicinal tradition where it doesn't matter, but people also forget that for hundreds of years, your pharmacist actually took the flavor of something very seriously, because they're selling you something that they want you to buy again. And that was, there's medicinal spirits running in parallel with pharmacy is a big story. And that's one of the reasons we don't have things like Amaros so much anymore, is because in this country, a lot of the culture was you would go to the pharmacy to get them. And then at one point, the government became very preoccupied with whether or not your pharmacist was getting you drunk without paying proper excise tax. So that transition started happening in the turn of the last century. So 1910s, teens, 20s, 30s. And by the time you get to Prohibition, they just don't come back. And the pharmacists start reducing the alcohol in them until it's the maximum amount of botanicals and the minimum amount of alcohol, to achieve that you're, not... If you watch some old movies from like the 20s, there's often an old character, often someone who claims to be a teetotaler, like, I don't drink at all. But then they're like, I'm feeling a little off today. I need Dr. So-and-so's golden bitters, and they'll have somebody run out and find this rare, now obscure bottle of golden bitters, and then he spends the rest of the movie getting drunk off of it, which is hypocrisy, but that's what everybody thought about then. But that's one of the reasons, especially as we develop scientific medicine, that, they went away. Because we're now talking about like extracted compounds rather than whole herbs, and it's a complicated story, but that's one of the reasons we don't have them anymore. The Europeans spent a lot of effort turning them into beautiful aesthetic experiences, and they still have them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and you see that like tinctures are still a thing in Europe, and like my wife's from Bosnia, and botanical medicines and herbalists are very common. And I think it's all kind of coming back now. I mean, people, I think the pendulum swung so far towards big pharma and this very, very scientific chemical-based approach to medicine. Right. And I think it's going to swing back towards more holistic herbal remedies. And
a lot of people are into that, there's a lot less scientific modern scientific evidence or stuff like that. So my focus is, how do you turn a lot of that traditional knowledge into just a lovely aesthetic experience.
Yeah.
And, the same practitioners who would make tinctures, for hundreds of years is just turning it into a complex tincture with many herbs and aromatics and turning it into something that you can enjoy.
Yeah.
Chartreuse went from the elixir of life for hundreds of years, a very concentrated medicinal herbal tincture, and then, around the 1600s into the middle 1700s, to keep the money flowing into their, monastery, they had to turn it into a liqueur. And that's a fascinating transition. It's a transition that doesn't necessarily happen in a lot of places in the world. The Chinese have an extremely robust herbal medicine practice, but it never really turned into complex, modern, botanical spirits.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to find the chartreuse equivalent.
Chartreuse, and that's an herb?
Chartreuse is an herbal botanical spirit. It's been around for 1,000 years in some form. Yeah.
Interesting. So with the little bit of time we have left, is there anything up at the Utah State Capitol that you're concerned with in terms of liquor legislation that you are opposed or you want to see happen?
Year to year, their progress is so incremental. They're afraid of making big changes.
Mm-hmm.
Alcohol is such a cultural touchstone issue for those folks. They're afraid to lose their grip on it, I think is really what you see.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, at the same time, I think if you ask them point blank, are you really shaping, say, drinking culture in Utah? They would say, no, we're not. We're just making people safe. We're making sure that, there's sort of an enforcement, safety mentality that sort of guides a lot of what they do. And alcohol does have some special problems. There are people with a very serious problem with alcohol. They're usually drinking vodka and not Amaro,
Mm-hmm.
But I think sometimes the culture here sees no difference between the two. And I think they very consciously sometimes filter out ever developing that knowledge.
And that is the most bizarre thing, because we had James on the program from Sugar House Distillery. He pointed out they converted their inventory management system to a Walmart style.
That's a whole
where they
story.
wanted to do bottle turns.
I'm glad he covered that.
And prioritize bottle turns above everything else.
Yeah.
So you're putting the Barton's vodka in the plastic bottle as the highest priority product in your state-run liquor store, when that is the product people use to get drunk.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to drink Amaro for the purpose of getting drunk, and you want to promote that if you're interested in.
It's interesting how your Barton's was very revealing of what their mentality was, because when they rolled out the inventory system that James talked about, they said it's all going to be based on sales, it's all going to be based on volume. Barton's is the number one selling product in the state. And for me, Barton's is a product that you see being sold to people with shaky hands paying an exact change,
The homeless population.
The homeless, or people who are
The
just
alcoholics.
like, the only thing I care about this is the intoxication factor. And what was interesting is that when they rolled out this program, one of the questions was asked is, how is it going to make determinations? How do you choose what products to take on? And the guy rolling it out said, well, if it were up to the program as we initially launch it, every store would be a stack of Barton's and nothing else. So we're kind of like going, okay, so your thinking as we roll this out is that you're just going to follow the sales no matter what, no other considerations. And that's like no considerations of what goes into cocktails, no consideration of the difference between Barton's and, say, Belvedere vodka, or it's just it was just, in some ways they're trying to say it's all about money. But at the same time, I think the big missing story that people aren't focusing on is, if you really say that you're going to follow the sales straight into low-cost, high-volume booze, that's exactly the booze that they say that they have the most problem with. We need to lower the alcohol limit in cars because these problem drinkers, which we know that there's a tiny number of drinkers that skew the statistics, and it's not the couple that's just going to the symphony that's had one extra glass of wine with dinner that is causing our problem in the state. But they seem to want to equalize the enforcement to include those people to be the same as the people who are drinking half of a 1750 milliliter jug of vodka a day. And that's where you kind of go, there's a sort of self-imposed blindness in how they're pursuing some of this. And
if you tipped that concept that they decided to pursue directly on its head and said, you know what, instead of equalizing all the liquor, let's favor the boutique local brands and make those only available, then people would probably consume a lot less, because top shelf vodka, your products, they cost more. But they're more of a sensory experience, and
it's a different customer.
It's a totally different experience.
We become very aware in the distillery business. There's a customer that is looking for experience, novelty, aesthetics, and there's a customer who's like, I've had them come to my shop. It's just like, will this get me drunk? How fast will it get me drunk? How strong is it? And it's like, that's a bottle of Kumel, my friend. And they're like, I don't care. And you're like, okay, you don't care whether it's Kumel? Then you're pretty much like, I don't think I'm going to sell to you today.
And you know who the guys were, after I was single and living in my house with a bunch of roommates, that you had to watch out for?
Yeah.
The return missionaries.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
They'd come over. I think I'm ready to get drunk. What do you got? And I'm like, no, just enjoy this craft beer, chill out, relax. No, what do you got? Let's pound. Let's pound some shots.
Here's one of my beliefs that's starting to creep in. And, I don't have a great deal of evidence to support this, but this is sort of my feeling. Is that if you take the non-drinking culture here, I think that they understand abusive drinking or, problem drinking much better than they understand aesthetically driven drinking. And if you say, which one are they familiar with? Which one are they kind of okay with? Which one are they afraid of? I actually am getting to where I think they're more afraid of aesthetically driven, cuisine-oriented, and connoisseurship-based drinking versus mass consumption. I get drunk, I crash cars, I do all of that sort of drinking, because I think when they look at drinking, they want to say, it's all that. There's the same amount of alcohol in this bottle as there is in that bottle, therefore they're the same. And I have no emotional experience distinguishing between a $100 bottle of wine and a $10 bottle of wine. So when I look at drinking, I want to say, well, it's all bad because it crosses my boundary. I don't drink. But then when somebody says, well, here's the most delicious cheese and wine pairing, they're just like, okay, this is tiresome. I don't want to hear about that part. I don't want to hear about these complex, instantaneous flavor experiences from a high-end gin versus something that somebody... So when I look at some of what they're doing with this inventory system, occasionally I begin to suspect, well, there's a sudden proliferation of cheap vodkas because Barton's is leading the way. So this little wave of saying, well, we need more cheap toasters, Walmart style.
Well, maybe they're catering to that return missionary crowd.
Well, or anybody with
it's just like this mindset. Let's get drunk fast and quick.
Yeah,
let's get the hangover.
Well, it seems almost desperately cynical for them to go, we're going to ignore all other considerations except for the money, even if it follows there.
Yeah, it's just bizarre.
That's when you try to challenge them. They get very defensive. They get very, no. We're adopting a very objective, it's all based on price and volume. Well, no, I think they're injecting a lot of their bias and a lot of that because they have some very black and white interpretations of these things. And I think there sometimes feels like a deeper, we just want to strangle this baby in the crib. We do not want this other culture taking root here. And the people that do best in that system are the people who actually make the products that are more like, I just want a bottle of cheap booze. And that's where people like me or James, I think, sometimes get concerned, is because you say, our businesses could easily thrive if we had a little bit more of a sophisticated partner in terms of how they do retail sales. But we're talking about an agency whose core identity is not retail sales. It's enforcement. So, yeah.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, so where can people come and experience Waterpocket?
Well, we have the distillery. We have a tasting room, a package store at the distillery, so all can be done there. Or if we're down in Torrey at Robbers Roost, similar experience. We have some products that are deployed in both places, but some unique ones in each. And that's the best way. And if you want to support us, The best thing to do is go into the stores and bug their managers and ask for our products and say, why don't you carry them? And that sort of thing. Do it politely, but, do it. There's a way of submitting by store feedback on their website. So find that place to submit per store feedback. Okay. The louder the chorus of voices and the more continuous they are, the more likely the DABC is going to say, the DABS now.
Oh, yeah.
I forget they've changed that. The more likely they are going to see. It's like they can't ignore the fact that there is a real demand for the products. And, they're ignoring the fact that this industry in almost every other state has wildly succeeded where people have supported it. So their idea that within the first 6 months we can't achieve the same sales, that James can't achieve the same sales as Jack Daniels, is a way of them I think, rigging the game against him. There's no local brand that can do. Jack Daniels couldn't do that, introducing another product versus their competitor. So, it's just make yourself heard, and come to the distilleries to learn how these products are made.
Yeah, it's fascinating, I think, to go to your distillery and to get the tour and to get the flight of tastings, because you really can't get that kind of experience unless you travel overseas. I think your distillery in particular is really unique that way. You're the only one doing these botanicals, these liqueurs, and these really special products.
There's some other folks making gin. New World up in Eden is making a cherry liqueur, and so you're seeing some of these things pop up here and there, and support them. You buy them. It's a great thing to do.
You are in South. No, not you're in just sort of.
We're just
West
over the line from Salt Lake into West Valley, so Redwood and 201 area.
All right.
Yeah. So
go check them out.
Yeah.
All right. Oh yeah, let's hear a comment.
So we've got one comment. I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. It's J.D. San. He says, this has been so interesting to learn all of this. Really good points. People's mental and physical health would benefit to feel difference between booze and liqueur. Thanks, both of you, for sharing.
Thanks
for tuning
very
in.
Much. Yeah, thank you everybody for watching. If you'd like to support Utah Stories, our brand new February issue has hit the stands. We've got a new feature in the magazine. It is our all-star locals listings, and it's in the back of the book. Go check that out, and you can find the best bars, tap rooms. We need to add you in there.
Oh, good.
I'll have to start that next month. And you can find the best places in downtown Salt Lake City. The NBA All-Star Game is coming to Salt Lake City next weekend, and we built that section just for the visitors who are coming for that event. But it's also for locals, and you can subscribe to Utah Stories, or a free digital newsletter, by visiting utahstories.com. You get the voice of local Utah delivered free to your inbox. And if you want to support our team of awesome, intrepid local journalists, subscribe to Utah Stories magazine. It is $3 a month, and that helps us out a ton, because 200 of you or so, or more than that, have subscribed to the magazine. It's been an awesome help to keep us printing the magazine, because printing costs have doubled since COVID started. So I really appreciate all of you who are doing that. So coming up next on the program, our next segment is the Friends of the Cottonwood Canyon, Little Cottonwood Canyon. They're coming on to talk about the gondola proposal. We had the mayor of Alta on the program last week, and we're talking to them about what's going to, they have statistics and studies and more numbers related to the claims that the gondola developers are using to push UDOT to build this gondola. And we would love to have your comments about that as well. So that's going to come up in about 5 minutes. We'll see you then.